All right. This is all backed by the theology of progress. So it's actually Halab who calls this term, right? Usually it's called the theory of progress, but he calls it the theology of progress, which is a really nice play on words, right? And sometimes sarcastic play on words and recoining words is a power mechanism, right? And you learn that through the through a concept that postmoderns like using. It's not called kill art. Does anybody know the real word for this? Um, Something around the words of kill art, like art that or concepts that end up like killing other concepts or denouncing them and moving on to other concepts, right? And so part of that is terminology, right? If this term that's coined for a certain thing, it means this, then you know what? I'm not okay with that, right? Or like adapting it and changing it. So the word gay or the word queer, right? It went from like a slur word to a word of pride and acceptance. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? So what is that? That's a change of language, right? In power and struggle and so on. Okay, anyway, so here's the theology, because it is a theology. It's literally a belief system of progress. What does it mean? Secularism created an imperative of moral progress when it took over and created the idea that history was just accumulating progress. Remember, think of the big picture. If nothing else exists except the material, then I must believe that there is progress. So there is civilizational progress, there is technological progress, okay? And this is part and parcel of our moral progress. Part of the progress that is occurring is moral. So we are objectively better than we were morally than we were 40 years ago. This is why they say, what do they say? When they need to justify people using racist comedy or things like that from like even 10 years ago, 7 years ago, right? What do they say? That was a different me. That was a different time period, right? Or when they try to justify the commercials that are extremely racist to black people or other such things, what do they say? They say that was a different time. As in, the moral progress of that time was lesser than ours now. We are more enlightened. The Enlightenment project is a continuation, and we are morally better than we were before. Right? So it's not just technological, it's not just civilizational, but it's also ethical. Why? Because you can separate. Remember, I said that line. You can separate between the metaphysical and between the physical. And ethics is part of the physical because it's incidental. It's not essential to humankind. It is incidental. And so the more society progresses, the more we are morally also progressing. Did I do a sharh of this concept for you guys? Has it become clear in your minds as to how one equals to the next? So 1 + 1 = 2. Here. Let me finish this slide and let me take your question, okay? So this is the ignorance of the metaphysical commitments, as I just said, right? Like it's not asking, it's as if we're not asking the question, what is your moral paradigm? As if we're not asking the question, where are you finding your morals from and your ethics from? How are you justifying them? Right? Under what ontological perspective? If I don't even agree with your epistemology or your ontology or your teleology, I don't agree that we are a sack of cells. I believe I have a soul and that when I die, my life continues. And my rights and duties are based off of that. So under what premise are you telling me that morality is to progress forward? On what justification? Under what evidence? Do you guys follow what I'm saying? Right. Under what metaphysical reality? Right. And so if you ever find yourself in a debate, don't go in before you agree on the metaphysical principles that you're going to be facing off of. Because if you don't, you're in for trouble. Because you're going to be talking points that are just going past one another. Like hijab. Hijab is my choice. Choice as in you are truly free. As in you are truly sovereign of your own body. As in you have full control over it. No, your body is Allah's. You don't fully own it. You are given a secondary stewardship. Your sovereignty is derived from God's. God tells you what's right and wrong. Not you. You're not truly sovereign of yourself. Neither do you have true free will. You have free will, but it works within God's qadr and qada. Doesn't leave it. You are His, as is everything in this world. So no, it's not truly my choice. It's God's choice. I am not truly free. It is only God who is truly free. And I find my freedom in my submission to Him. For that is salvation of this world and the hereafter. Right? It's an ignorance of the metaphysical commitments that require you to believe in the theology of progress. Okay. But what does the flow of time have relevance with morality and God? What's the relationship between time and God here? Right? Why is it that apparently, why can't, okay, like if you were to simply ask why is it that today we're better than we were 30 years ago? Why? Like morally speaking, tell me why. Oh no, we've had more technologies now. We're more enlightened now. You know, we're better than we used to be. Okay, why? Just tell me why. What does technology have to do with your morality? Unless you're telling me that because now we have technology that influences how you can physically cut off somebody's penis and redevelop them into something else. And so now that justifies this type of thinking, which is part and parcel of why this happens. There's new technologies that come about that need to be monetized and commodified. Remember, we were talking about the attributes of modernity. And so part of that is a justification of a new method of thinking that's constantly changing, that's in line with the capitalist model. Right. And there's many papers. There's a doctor. He does a really good job. His name is Dr. Nakira Akasi. And unfortunately, his papers have been taken off, and I think he was suspended. But he did quite a bit of research on the intersectionality between these topics, between the technological growth of this area, and in between gender relations and gender identity politics, right? And how they overlap, right? And then his papers were taken off. Right? This tells you it's not a tolerant place and it's not neutral. It's definitely value positive, right? Okay. So logically, does time have to do with God's morality? Does God all of a sudden, wal-'iyadhu billah, have an epiphany that every few years He's going to be morally changing us and saying something is actually wrong and something is right now? Something was wrong and something is right now? Like, would that make sense for us? Yes.
I'm just curious, how do we understand what you just said with different sharia or the also came with certain things?
Yeah, very good. Very good question. Very good question.
That's
Very good. The universal principles of the Sharia stay the same. This is why you see fasting, charity, other things throughout all religions, even if they've been extremely changed to have belief systems that are different, you still see that. So yeah, you know, we can easily explain the perennial project into Tawheed, that the asl was the monotheism of the world. So that's our anthropological reading, right? That the essence is like if Christianity in under 90 years can go through so many changes that by the time, you know, the apostolic church fathers are deciding on what is Bible and what is not, that it's so changed from what it originally was in less than 100 years, okay? That you have the Trinity being part of central belief systems, right? And that you believe Jesus is the Son of God and He is God of the tri-Godhead, right? Then clearly it's not far to believe that other religions that came before, such as Buddhism, Taoism, and others, were highly influenced and could have been easily changed. Do you follow what I'm trying to say? But the moral edifice of God has stayed the same, right? And you can see that. Do you follow what I'm saying? And so within other sharias, right, you have this constant universal acceptance. This is why you have like, okay, well, killing is bad. I think this is a universal principle. What happened to that recording? Okay. This is good. This always happens. SubhanAllah. Okay. But do you understand? an usuli response, Qarafi, rahimahullah, and also I think Ibn Juwayni, one of their responses to this question actually in usul al-fiqh is that God desired and intended something specific for a people. Right, just like how nasikh mansukh works, right? Just like how abrogated and abrogation works. That the final word is what God intended, right? And those were steps towards the final word. Do you follow what I'm trying to say? Right? In the sense of how the final word is the true intent of God, right? Or the final hukum, the final ruling, while the ones in between are okay for that period for those people, and so they're morally accepted. So that's why we don't have we are not Kantian, in our morality, that that we're not Mu'tazila. Do you follow what I'm saying? That all good is only known by logic or rationale. We know that it is God who truly gives us the rationality, the details of rationality, or sorry, morality, the details of morality that then we apply in our lives. Do you follow what I'm trying to say? Right. As for the universals, those are there. Right. Those aesthetical appeals of ethics, those are there through the fitrah. Right. But then they can be clouded, right, through socialization. Right. Yes. Hold on.
Sorry.
I'm not going to discriminate. Yeah.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry, is the imperial, the moral progress, does it have a lot to do with social Darwinism?
Social what, sorry?
Darwinism.
Yeah, of course. Darwinism is an essential tool for the project of modernity. It was really hard to break away from God until they got Darwin, or Darwinian evolution, because you had different types of evolutions before Darwin. You had theological evolutions, that God is part of the picture of evolution. It's through his ordainment and providence that evolution is occurring at different steps and stages. It was specifically through the rules that Darwin laid out, right, of speciation, survival of the fittest, right? Then the original ancestor, right? These rules were then very, very important to rewrite the anthropology of mankind within materialist secular terms. Do you follow what I'm saying? Can we take the question later? Inshallah, just write it down. Yeah. طيب. Opposite of the teleology of traditional faith. This is an absolute opposition. This is an absolute opposition, right? And so without the guidance of God, our worlds / communities will crumble, right? There is no space for anything else here. Sorry, I have some lecture notes here that I just want to follow along with. So I'm just going to quickly open them up. What slide number is this? Because I think there must have been some points that I wrote down in the thing. Yeah, here we are. Wait, hold on. This is skipped. No. La, it's not skipped. Okay, good. All right. نعم. So the seculars have a different perspective even on history, right? They say, look. When we study the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we don't believe in revelation truly. So that's why the only possible explanation that has ever been around is that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam took from the people around him, even though he was unlettered, even though he had never traveled outside of Arabia, right? And this they know, but yet the only possible answer that they can come to is that he took it from others, and through his own wisdom and so on, he was able to find the reforms for women's rights and other things. Do you follow what I'm saying? And give rights to people and equalities that others didn't have. Right? That's a vision, right? That is in line with moral progress, the theology of progress, that we are slowly getting better, right? And the Prophet ﷺ was part of that for them. Do you get what I'm trying to say, right? So it's really problematic that when you use things like this, like in the public area where you say, the Prophet ﷺ gave women, he was the first to call to women rights and human rights and this and that. It's absolutely trash. you know, and it's also very, very harmful. Like, yes, sure, there's a certain level of it that you can use for like commensurability, like translation of ideas, right? So there's this idea of commensurability, to be able to take a tradition and be able to align it with another, right? But they are incommensurable, as in they have totally separate internal logics, right? That do not go with one another. These are two separate worldviews. Do you get what I'm saying, right? And what's it called? To use this type of language at a level of ourselves when we're speaking to ourselves, I'm sorry, it's just stupid and it's ignorant. If you're speaking to like a kafir, you're giving da'wah, معليش خلاص عادي ما عليك يعني, it's okay. ماشي الحال. Go with the flow, until he comes to Islam and then so on. And even then you should be a bit careful. You should do this on basira, on insight. But within ourselves, seriously? The past 20 years of garbage we've been feeding our own communities. The Prophet ﷺ, women's rights, in the sense of the modern sense, in the secular sense. No wonder you have people looking up to like the LGBTQ and thinking that we're totally one with them. No wonder. Right? Because this is what you're telling the people. You're telling this to our little girls. So obviously they're not going to be able to differentiate between feminism and Islam. They're not going to be able to. How are they? It's not going to be possible because you're teaching them theology of progress. Ittaqillah. Without the guidance of God, our worlds and our communities will crumble and are crumbling, right? Let me finish this section and we'll take questions, inshallah. Okay, deconstructing the arguments of secularism. How is secularism legitimized? We've already taken this example because, okay, so the example of like, the hijab, wear it for choice, and then you become duty-bound or obligated to wear it from God. It's not a valid reason to a secular person. If you were to say that I'm obligated by God to wear the hijab, then it's not an acceptable reasoning within a secular discourse. So you are led to say it's my choice. Instead of saying I am one who submits to God and I find my salvation in being Allah-centric in my life and seeing that the path to salvation in this world and the hereafter, in my personal life, in my social life, in my ethical life, is to submit to the dictates of God, right? That reasoning is not acceptable or valid, right? All right, then you have Asad, who was a Muslim. I think he's still alive. Yes, Asad is still alive. Do you guys know whose son he was? Muhammad Asad? Asad, come on. No, man. Muhammad Asad is a leading anthropologist. He's 80 plus now, but he was a game changer in his studies and in the works he had to do. Do you know whose son he is? Have you guys read The Path to Mecca? The Road to Mecca? Who's the author?
Sheikh.
Yes.
Sheikh.
Yes.
I think it's the other way around. Talal Asad is the son of Muhammad Asad, no?
معلش. I gave it away. Jazakallah khair. Yes. It is Talal Asad, who is the son, and the father is Muhammad Asad. And he was a Jewish scholar from Austria who accepted Islam and came to Pakistan when it was first conceived, right? And then he represented Pakistan at the UN, and then he had his journey after that, right? So Talal Asad is his son, and in his writings, he slowly comes towards like a very Islamic perception of things by his later writings in anthropology, and he was a game changer of anthropology. Like he's one of the pioneers of contemporary anthropology, right? So he's a bit of a difficult read, but it's really worth it, right? To read him. Right, and then most of the field today is actually from his students. A lot of the field today are his students. So you have like Saba Mahmoud, who's one of his students. You have others who are his students who take heavily from Asad. Right? Dr. Overmere is also a student. Him, Dr. Overmere Anjem, the director at Yaqeen, and also the president and the director and executive director of Attique's Institute. Okay. Okay. La ilaha illallah Rasulullah. Asad's way of thinking. Where's this? Now, if pre-modern governance is about brute compulsion and force, liberal governance is not based on consent and negotiation, but rather in the middle state called statecraft, or what Foucault called governmentality. Okay? So it's the government that dictates what is and what isn't acceptable. So the secular mandates are performed by the nation state. Right? And so Foucault called this governmentality. Right? Which is that the art of conducting the affairs of the people is left up to the government. Why? Because the government is technically supposed to be elected by the people. So they're supposed to represent the will of the people. Okay, let me ask you this. The 2025 elections are coming up for Canada. If we all decided that we're not going to partake in the elections because none of these parties represent the will of the Canadians as a nationality, say for instance, right? Would that mean all of a sudden now tomorrow there'd be no government? No, they would go about governance and re-election. It's a myth, and it never was. It was a myth that was made up, a religion of progress that was made up to justify moving towards the nation state being the physical manifestation of modernity. Right? So the nation state is what upholds the aqa'id, the belief system of modernity and secularism. Okay? It is a method of discipline and puts discipline in spheres. It puts discipline in spheres of education, spheres of tolerance, spheres of policing, spheres of militant activity, to do things that will collectively enforce the protection and security of their borders, whether that's democratic republic style, whether that's the Republican style of an empire such as the United States, or whether that's any other method that is used, right? Or whether that's the Russian method of securing their borders, right, by invading Ukraine. Both use the same logic, right? In a case of emergency, they can call in martial law. And the reason why they can call in martial law is because the martial violence is only acceptable, right? Militant violence is acceptable to ensure the order of the secular nation state. Okay? When is violence necessary? What type of violence is necessary? Okay? When is violence necessary? Can somebody answer me that question? I just gave the answer away in the previous example. Yes. When is violence necessary according to the secular world order? Yes.
When the state is being when the state's secularism is being followed, and there's radicalism.
Very good. So effectively, when the state decides that secular mandates and dictates are not being met, or when they're being crossed, right? That is when so either when the public sphere is being encroached upon, right? That's why, what did Trudeau do in his government when the fuckers did their encampment or whatever in Ottawa? He called it a state of emergency. Why? Because he had to justified it by what? By saying that the public sphere and the functioning of the government, the governmentality, was being affected. Right? And hence he called it a state of emergency. He went into people's private things. He took over their bank accounts, took all this private that's supposed to be private and is not supposed to be part of the public sphere, is not supposed to be available to the public. And then he put people to jail, and still the leaders of the trucking convoy are still in jail. Right? And anybody who was attached to them, anybody who ended up funding them, they all got penalized. Right? This was taken to court. and the government was found guilty of doing it illegally, right? Because they could not justify the public sphere being encroached upon or the governmentality truly being affected. But do you guys understand how this is when secular violence is mandated within there? Do you follow what I'm saying? How about if somebody says, this person spreading atheism in my community is a problem. He needs to be checked. Is that okay? No, it's not. It's radicalism. Because it's not secular reasoning. Right? Yes.
But there's one thing I don't get, like the whole secularism, governmentality, but if government is like elected by the people, wouldn't culture just change? But wouldn't culture influence the government anyway?
Oh, very good, very good. But that's precisely what we're saying. It's a myth. Right?
For example, LGBT stuff like more normalized in the West, so they have laws for it, but they don't in say Middle East.
Yeah.
But then there's a
But then, yeah, but the why? Because it's a myth. You follow what I'm saying, right? It's not the will of the people that enforces this, right? It's what the imperial empire, the liberal empire dictates. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? It's what power dictates in the imperial liberal empire, right? That starts and sits at America, right? And then the transatlantic with the UN and the NATO alliance, right? This is what dictates what is right and wrong. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? And it only became acceptable within the West because of constant policying and so on and so forth, which is allowed within the secular concept. Do you follow what I'm trying to say, right? Yes, precisely, right? Like modernity, many people have said modernity is the killing of God and placing the modern nation state on the throne of God. Right? That's what it is. Right? And there are many other depictions of it like that. There are actual arts and depictions of this. Right? And that's what it is. So you got to the very essence and the core, the very kernel of it, which is that's what it is. They literally play God. Right? So any violence other than that is violence that is not acceptable. If I want to protect my brothers and sisters in Gaza, and if I went, what would I be labeled? A terrorist. Because my reasoning was religious. And such a violence is radical and outside of the bounds of secular conformity. But if a Zionist, a secular atheist Zionist, goes to go kill, rape, and pillage our brothers and sisters in Gaza, to be a racist, nasty Zionist, then the government will give them free tickets. And that's okay. Because that is the secular logic. Right? What is acceptable violence? What isn't acceptable violence is dictated by the secular. Okay. Another example is aborting a child at 6 months. The fetus at 6 months is violence. Yes or no? What is it? Is it violence?
It's secularism or
Well, in the secular world, is it violence?
Free choice.
فيه خلاف. There's a khilaf, right? It depends on what side you're taking, right? Because this is still being discussed within the public domain. It hasn't been decided on. This is where the cultural wars exist. This is where the cultural wars exist, right? And so some will give personhood and identity to a fetus before birth, while others will not. Right? And that's identity politics is separate. I would need to do a separate thing on, how does identity occur, the philosophy of identity. That's a separate discussion, right? But the point is, this is violence that is debated on its acceptability. When is it acceptable? When is this violence acceptable? When is it moral? When is it not? What can you give moral autonomy to the child or not? Do you follow what I'm saying, right? These things are then discussed. Okay. As for religious violence, you say Allahu Akbar and slaughter an animal, you're a terrorist. You know, your white neighbors are going to start shaking and call the police, right? Whereas other types of violence are seen as acceptable or even necessary. Not only are they acceptable, they are necessary. Say, for instance, so, you know, a Muslim country got up and decided to test a couple of nuclear bombs on Japan, right? And in the process killed hundreds of thousands, and then did not allow a single land, those lands, to be fertile ever again in living memory or in thousands of years. And for those people to never have kids, and for their kids to come out with deformities. This would be worse than what Hitler did. And the world would never forget it and be the worst atrocity. But the US, it justifies it as necessary to end the war. We had to drop those bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We had to. Okay. But how about Tokyo? Oh, about Tokyo, we had already bombed it to smithereens already. And Osaka and every other place in Japan. So the only places that were left were Hiroshima and Nagasaki because they had military factories that were creating material. So we just so happened to drop these bombs. And by the way, it's not even that I felt so bad, you know, I dropped them at the same time. No. I dropped one. I know what I did. And I came back a few days later and I dropped it on the other city, even bigger. Right? And my political outlook, my ethicists, my people are proud that we did this. We justify it. And it's not seen to be worse than what Hitler did, nor what Stalin did, nor what Churchill did, who's supposed to be a hero. We have our major streets in Mississauga, Winston Churchill, who starved to death millions of Muslims in Bengal. And he said that these rats should not be able to have children, so you might as well kill them. Took all their rations. These aren't terrorists. These aren't evil people, because they're on the right side of progressive moral history, guys. Because the liberal world order won out instead of the Nazis or the communists, who are all madahib, millatun wahida. Al-kufru millatun wahida. They are all the same kufr. They're all different madahib of the same deen. They're all moderns. With nothing to do with Allah. But they were on the right side of moral history, which progresses every 20 years. Okay, moving on. I think this is the last quote of the section, and then we can take a break, inshallah. We can take a break after this. Is Wael Halaq says, and there are other quotes, but this quote is nice. He says, let us remember what secularism is. Secularism is not just segregating religious life into the private sphere. It is rather the determination of the state of what religion is and is not, where and how it can be exercised. In terms of political theology, secularism is the murder of God by the state. The state can delimit, limit, exclude, or curtail any religious practice, and thus has the power to determine the quality and the quantity of the religious sphere as it sees fit. This is because the state is the ultimate sovereign. With its own reason for existence. You go strap a bomb to yourself, go underneath the tank and kill yourself for the state, for the nation. It's the ultimate reason. It exists for itself. Iqbal said in Urdu that from the new gods, the most jealous is the modern nation state. Right. It will stop there, inshallah, and we'll open up for Q&A before we move on to the next session. Now, we had a sister who was sister. You had a question before? Yeah. Okay. Okay, we'll take it from the brothers because we've been taking from the sisters now.
You re-explain the essence way of thinking. Maybe in a more simple term. Simple.
It's very simple. Look, before you had Hobbes' Leviathan. You needed a strong, strict ruler to keep people in check. So people are nasty, they're bestial, their natures are ugly, their fitrah is disgusting, they're evil. And so, but we're not comfortable with one person being in charge. So let's think of a way of changing that, because the moment a monarch is topped over, you have multiple French revolutions, right? One after the other, and each is as gory as the next. So we'll give the power to the people. And in it, we will find truth. In it, this is the right way. Okay? And so while doing that, the people have decided that the secular state, a separation of religion from the political sphere and governance, is what is to be accepted. So the government may never approach anything from the religious standpoint. Politics is new, it's separate. Ethics is new, then it's separate, because ethics needs to be done at a level of community, at a level of society. And likewise, then religion is now new because it's being reformed by the secular state. Does that cover? Okay. Okay, one from the sisters. Yes.
Deism, they believe God created everything and just he doesn't intervene.
Yep.
Right? So is there like a good evidence or good arguments for intervention of God without revelation?
Oh, so Bassam Zawadi has a very good paper he wrote for his master's. It's on deism, right? So just Google it. But I'll give you the 4 arguments that he presents in maybe 2 minutes. First one is that if God is truly, now, if God is truly all wise, if God is truly all wise or exceedingly wise, and this is this you have to go into theology where they start debating, okay, is God fully perfectly wise or non-perfect or etc. And in both case scenarios, if God was all wise, perfectly wise, or exceedingly wise, right? Then how could an all-wise God, whose wisdom itself dictates that things are done for a reason? Human beings, do we ever make anything without reason? Even art. Art is done for a reason, is it not? For beauty, for capturing aesthetics, right? If anything that has ever had the attribute of wisdom, and God being perfect or exceedingly wise, if he truly is so, then his wisdom is incompatible with deistic non-intervention within the world. Because that would mean that God created and left without a reason. That means that God has not explained his reason. That would mean that God created without a reason, and such a God is not all wise, hence this cannot be the case. That's the first one. Second one, if God is truly all good or exceedingly good, and I'll only give you 3 in khalas, yani. If you want to do more, you can go back to the paper. If God is exceedingly good or all good, perfectly good, then his perfection of goodness is incompatible with his non-intervention in the world. 4, would we call a good parent a parent who's a deadbeat who never sees his children? Would we call a good teacher a teacher who doesn't care and put in the work to make sure their students pass and have good ethics and morals? Would we call a good policeman a policeman who sees somebody get robbed in front of their eyes? Would we call a good firefighter who allows a fire to go on in front of his eyes and doesn't do anything? No, you would not. So then how can God, the all good, be a good God and not want to be in touch with us, not want to check up on us, not want to give us a way that is clear and simple for us to follow, for us to be guided, for us to be good, if he was truly good? Does a mother who does not love her child, does a mother not constantly call? I'm sure you guys are going to start getting calls sooner or later. Where are you? Texts. Where are you coming home? Etc. Right? Because your mother cares. Right? So how can the most loving God, who loves you more 70 times, 700 times more than your own mother, who loves their child, their toddler, their infant, how could he not want to show you, to be in touch with you, to love you, to communicate with you? That's impossible, right? And there's more arguments, but I think I'll just keep it to these two for now. Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I can say that. See what's happening in the world. How is all good God?
Well, khalas, then in that case scenario, you move to an argument where God isn't all good, right? But then that means our understanding of God is very different, because most theists, right, or most people who would argue would say that God necessarily needs to be all good. Do you follow what I'm saying? And so that's why even atheists, right, they say, I don't believe in God because of all this that is happening. So the implication is, if God was true, then he must be all good. So generally speaking, that's the argument. But he does present an argument for an evil God as well, right? So just refer back to the paper, inshallah. Bassam Zawadi, Bassam Zawadi, Zawadi. He also has a phenomenal page. It's called Islamic Discourse on Substack. Yeah, he's mashallah, he's amazing. Allah yahfazah, he's a very good guy, mashallah. Yeah. Yes.
You're talking to on the idea of
That's
or he like introduce women rights and whatever. Like I can say the argument of like maybe they were like burying baby girls and then but are you saying we just shouldn't frame it in the frame of like women like
Yes. I'm saying be careful with the types of terminology you're using, right? I'm saying you can say, look, the Prophet, peace be upon him, brought true salvation, right, for mankind. He gave everybody their duties and rights. So you see how you're changing the way you're discussing things, right? He put everybody within the light of God. The way the Sahaba said, we were a people ignorant and barefooted. Then the Prophet ﷺ, Allah sent us a prophet from amongst us, who then showed us the path and took us out of darkness of worship of others into the worship of God. And that's why we are here. So many of us died, and the ones who survived will now rule over you. Khalas, there's no other option. You follow what I'm saying, right? This is what the Sahaba said to them, to the Persian emperors. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? So you're saying that, look, the Prophet ﷺ came to emancipate, to give salvation of this world and the hereafter to mankind. Right? So it's a very different dialogue that's occurring. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? You're not self-secularizing. Do you get what I'm saying, right? You're not self-censoring. Do you understand what I'm saying, right? You're giving a more holistic da'wah. Right?
That would be my actually.
Yeah.
So say it that way or like
I think look, if you're like, look, so honestly speaking, when it comes to like moral issues, like the age of Fatima radiallahu ta'ala, the age of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha for marriage and other ethical arguments that they bring, I think more better than that is to start with, I'm just trying to know today, how do you base your beliefs? Where do you get them from? Right? And you start with that, and that will really throw them off, because these are metaphysical commitments they've never even entertained. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? And so you're starting from the principal questions, which is what we're talking about, from the roots before the branches. Okay? Over there, you cut off one branch, you get a hold of it, then they're going to cut off another, you're going to get a hold of it. I'm sorry, what's wrong with the tree here? It's a khabith tree. Let's get rid of that first. You get what I'm saying, right? Then we'll move on to the branches. Do you get what I'm saying, right? So it's the same thing. If you start addressing ethical issues without addressing the principal matters, you're going to fall into the same issues. Right. As for like details of how to give da'wah, in that detail, I personally, I don't do a lot of like non-Muslim da'wah. So somebody who like Hamza Zortzis, I'm assuming he'll be coming back, inshallah, for I shouldn't have said that, but he's coming back for some of the conferences or conventions that are happening. So maybe that type of stuff you can ask the people who've spent a lot of time on the ground doing da'wah, right? Like in terms of like actual trainings. Aira does trainings like that. Sapiens does trainings like that. Like how to do that, and they have groups and they go for things like that. Do you follow what I'm saying? So, like, yeah.
Just a clarification question. Your response to Brother Islam's question on obligation, if I understood it, so we had stated that if someone were to approach someone about how God's application doesn't entail his moral stance changing, the response would be that that the transitionary changes were in God's wisdom to gradually get them to that perfect point.
Yes, absolutely. The way Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha said, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made wine haram, had made alcohol haram from day one, nobody would have listened. Right? But when the ruling came after the slow transition, then the streets of Medina were flowing with wine. Right? So this is the transition of God wanting you to come to the desired outcome through direct revelation, right? Not through you being given, like, you being left alone and doing your own thing. Do you get what I'm saying, right?
You mentioned that secularism created like a way of thinking that over time you gain progress, right? Like, what if they come to you and, like, it's a great point you made. What's the response to them if they come and they say, well, we've advanced in science and we've come with new revelation, new viewpoints that we hadn't discovered before?
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's the response to that? Something like that.
Right. But you tell them, how does that explain moral progress? Like, how is today morally better than 20, 30 years ago? Do you get what I'm saying, right? Like, so if you ask them that, they're going to say, because of technology. Do you get what I'm saying, right? Because we are more advanced, we're more enlightened, right? Tell them, what are you basing that off of? Like, how are you justifying that you're more enlightened today than you were 20 years ago?
Say they say we came up with a biological discovery or something.
So are biological discoveries synonymous with or equal to moral development? Do you get what I'm saying, right? Does that mean killing was okay 20 years ago and it's better now? Like, just give them an example.
For example, LGBT.
Yeah, okay.
They'll say, well, they'll try to make these arguments how science has discovered that this is the case, or
What science? There's no gay gene. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars on a gay gene. There's none to be found. Where is it in science? Like, even within the science discourse, there's nothing to prove any of this. This is all built off of an extremely psychologized, sexualized concept of the self. And again, I didn't want to go there, but that's where that discussion goes, right? Right?
Yeah. I feel like when it comes to theological progress, from their understanding, it's more of anything that progresses to give them more right for their own desires, like actually at the comment that the correct.
Right. So again, that stuff we're going to get into when we talk about liberalism, right? So like saying, oh, is this positive liberty or negative liberty, and how does that work? Okay, so inshallah we'll get into that over there. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa ba'd. So here now we move on to the next section of this presentation, which is on an account of liberalism. Now we're going to be doing a theoretical account of liberalism. Theoretical here, please write down. Theoretical here is synonymous with philosophical. So we will be doing a philosophical and a theoretical presentation of liberalism. Now, as we've already stated before, philosophical liberalism is more wider and expansive than how we think of the left and the right, right? It's a lot more than that. In fact, communism, Marxism, socialism, Nazism, right? All of these fascism, all of these isms fall underneath philosophical liberalism. It's a very massive category and area that all of these will fall underneath. The differences are that they are different madhahib, as in they believe that they have it figured out in terms of how to go about achieving these principles. So they agree on the principles. In most of the principles they agree on, right? The bigger ones, such as the ones that we'll present, the big three, right? The trinity of liberalism. And then after that, khalas, they start to disagree in the furu'. So it's like the same, so think of like the madhahib al-arba'a, right? The four schools. They're all valid schools of the Sharia, right? And they all agree on their principles. They agree on a vast majority of everything. And then there's details in which they might disagree, which are accepted differences, right? So would we call, because of a difference of opinion between the Hanafiya and the Malikiya, would we say that this one now is out of the religion? No, we would not. We would say they are still part of the religion, okay, and part of Sunnism, okay, and so is with all these different isms, feminism, etc. These are all different instantiations and efforts to achieve principles that are agreed on broadly underneath philosophical liberalism, okay? So a theoretical account of liberalism and a historical account are a bit different because you're explaining the theory on one side and the other you're explaining the history. They can be done together and that's the right way to do it, but it's a very involved study, requires a lot of effort and work. Somebody who does this very well for secularism is Charles Taylor in his book, A Secular Age, right? Charles Taylor covers this in much detail in his book, A Secular Age. It's a very advanced read. It's not a beginner read, but it does this well. There are other more beginner-friendly books that can also be discussed. But as an example of where both are being done coinciding is Charles Taylor. In fact, he would be considered one of the first people to do this in this manner, where he's doing a history and he's doing a development of concepts. So it's called a histography. You're doing both at the same time, right? And they're developing. Another one is After Virtue. After Virtue does this pretty well as well. Yeah. Okay. Moving on. What is liberalism? Liberalism, as a general rule, this is the qaida, this is the asl, this is to maximize individual liberty. To maximize individual liberty. Everybody goes about this in different ways. So this is the asl that everybody agrees on. We need to maximize individual liberty. How you go about that, whether you give the entire power to the state and then nobody has any property or ownership over anything, then that's a communist understanding. Whether you go about that by saying having less government and so on and so forth, that's a more classical libertarian perspective. Whether you say no, you need to enrich the state's agency by giving them control over certain things and more so on, more active engagement. That's a more late liberal or modern liberal theory, right? And so on. These are all different, right? Whether you think that only people of the same race should be here so that we can be a true nation. So a true nation is a nation that all the people are the same in color, in language, in race, in background, then this is a different theory as to how to maximize people's liberty, and so on. And so on. So do you guys understand when we say that philosophical liberalism is more wider? This is what we mean. Okay. Now, let us discuss some of the pillars of liberalism. There are 4 pillars of liberalism we mentioned here, and yeah, generally speaking, the first is individual liberty, as we already mentioned. The second is individual equality. Now, the difference between liberty is freedom, right? Being able to be as free as possible. And we already discussed how that's not possible because only Allah is the most free, because Allah is all powerful, right? And we're not all powerful. We're extremely limited in our capacities, right? Now, number 2 is individual equality, as in everybody needs to be the same. Okay, everybody needs to be equal, right? Then, you need to have a schedule of individual rights. Okay, everybody needs to, you need to have a schedule of individual rights that everybody needs to have, right? And then the last one is democracy. So this is liberalism. So this is more political. So now we're going into a theoretical, but more involved, specifically liberal theory, right? Rather than philosophical liberalism, which we will critique a little bit later onward. So right now, we're going to be now we're getting involved into what we know as liberalism. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? We're getting into what we know as liberalism, right? So these are the pillars of that. So individual liberty, individual equality, a schedule of individual rights, and democracy. Okay? These are the pillars. These are the pillars, the arkan of iman of liberalism. Okay. Now, within the school, or within the madhab of liberalism, you have 6 points of major khilaf. You have 6 points of major khilaf. Okay, 6 areas of difference of opinion. The first one is in the meaning of liberty. What does that exactly mean? The second is the theories of value. How do we give something value? Because obviously, if we are going to be saying, hey, listen, people need to have goods, goods as in the goods, like the goods of the world, right? Whatever that is, we need to attach value. How do we come to that conclusion if we are operating within a modern secular paradigm? Okay, you guys with me? All right. So how do you justify values? How do you justify values? Right. The third one is a social ontology, which is what is the makeup of society? You guys know what ontology means, right? Like what is it? And so social means like what is society? How should society look like? Right. So that's social ontology. The next one is justice for all. Okay, justice needs to be for all. All right. And what that looks like is there's a difference of opinion. What does that look like? How does that look? The next one is the scope for religious-based exceptions as well as multiculturalism. Okay. So these are points of khilaf. How far does religious exception go? How far can you stretch it? Is there space for any of it in the first place? You know, Quebecians would say no, right? The liberals would say there's space for halal mortgages, right? Where do you draw that line? Okay. Multiculturalism. Should we have brown people like us coming into the country? Right? Should we not? Right? How far do we allow their cultures? Should we push the brakes on our cultural influence on them? Or should we pressure them further to integrate and assimilate into our ways? Right? Which one should we be doing more of? Okay. This is where all these culture wars are based off of as well, right? So you see them playing out. The next one is international relations. How like what type of liberalism are we looking at? Are we looking at a liberalism that is deeply global, that is exporting it to the world and wants to free the world and deliver democracy to Iraq by bombing it down to nothing, and taking all its fuel? Or are we looking at a more America first type of vision here? So these are points of khilaf between liberals. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? Right? Do you guys see some of the similarities that we're talking about right now? Right? Are you guys seeing how these play out within politics? Right? So these are very real. These do occur. Right? Okay. Let's discuss each one of them, inshallah. First one is the meaning of liberty. The meaning of liberty is the first type of liberty that we're going to be talking about is negative liberty. This is the absence of external coercion. Okay? Nobody is stopping me from doing what I want. This is classically what liberalism does. Classically, liberalism is about small governments. Notice the words I'm using. Have you guys heard these being used by politicians? Have you guys heard Pierre Poilievre use the word small government? When I come into power, it'll be about small government, less control. Have you guys heard him say things like that? Right? This is in line with a negative theory of liberty, right? Smaller government, less control, more individual liberty.
Getting rid of bureaucracy.
Getting rid of bureaucracy. Very good. I'm going to get rid of the red tape. I'm going to allow people to build more. Do you see how this is a conservative, negative liberty mindset, right? A more classical liberty mindset, right? Now, in contrast to that, in later liberalism, such as Rawlsian liberalism, that starts from the 90s. So Rawls is effectively the one who rehabilitated liberalism in the 90s. So his famous book, Lectures on Politics, is where he comes with his vision, which is more it's more socialistic. So as in there's more socialism involved in it, and that's the type that we're more familiar with in Canada. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? Right? And so it takes on many ultimate. We'll discuss it. Anyways, so this is called positive liberty. This is called positive liberty. So I told you guys that, remember we mentioned that this comes about after World War II. It comes about after the recessions, right? In seeing multiple ones go on. So ones in the 40s, the Great Depression, right? In the 50s, was it the 40s? The 40s or 50s? Right. It was about the World War era. And then after that, you have the one in the 90s, right? Then you have the one in 2008, right? So by this point, people are starting to realize, hold on, we want the government more involved. Do you follow what I'm saying? Like there's systems and their so on and so forth. So positive liberty is I can do what I want with my life, okay? The government should enable me to pursue my liberty. The government should enable me to pursue my liberty, okay? So legalization of gay marriage, right? Identity politics becoming part of human rights at the UN Charter, right? That, and then making it a problem for the FIFA World Cup, but still killing hundreds of thousands in Gaza, right? That right there is, oh yeah, and at the same time, Israel is celebrating transgenderism and having a day for the rainbow, right? That right there is positive liberty, right? That is positive liberty. So the government must enable me to do what I want with my life. So it's not enough that I do what I want. I need recognition and I need enablement from the government, right? So the government is enabling my liberties. Do you get what I'm saying? So this is more in line with the type of liberalism that's on the left or is more permeated within the academy, right? More permeated within the academy, right? So social liberals, like socialism, like Rawlsian liberals, will emphasize that there is a need to be a minimum, like, of material means. Who are the ones who are always fighting for higher minimum wage? The one that's about to kick in, and it's going to further destroy the economy, huh? The NDP, very good. The New Democratic Party, far left. Yeah, far left. And so they are more socialist liberals, This is why, what do you see white people calling people on the left? Well, these socialists, these Marxists, these commies. You follow what I'm saying, right? So as in, it doesn't attach to my madhab. You follow what I'm saying, right? And so they will emphasize higher, lower. They will talk about universal income, right? Everybody having a certain income. They're the ones who say that, these types of things, right? And these are Marxist ideas that were then furthered into liberalism by John Rawls in the 1990s, not 1900s, 1990s, so very recent. Right? I think Rawls is still alive. I don't know. Anyways, now a Republican conception is freedom for domination. So this is negative liberty. Freedom, gun rights. How dare you put anything against my access to guns, right? Leave my children be, right? Stuff like that. Okay, so this is more, what is it? Negative liberty. All right. Next one, theories of values. Right? Here's another khilaf. Theories of values. Okay. There is no God anymore, right? In this paradigm, he's not part of the discussion. So even if you're a Christian, if you're an evangelical, that's awesome. But as an evangelical, you are still a capitalist. This is what the neoliberals are. So the neoliberals who had a very particular theory about international politics, about etc., they were all evangelicals, but yet their conception of God had nothing to do with their politics. Are you guys with me? Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Right? Why? Because they're secular moderns and they are neoliberals. Okay. So the conception of God is not part of this paradigm. So all that is left is the materialist world. So within this, then now what do you need to do? You have two major theories. You have the deontological theory. What is it? It's called the Deontological theory, it's also known as Kantian physics. What is it? Sorry, not Kantian physics. Kantian ethics. What is it known as? Kantian ethics. Because the major proponent of it is Kant, right? It's essential goods. Essential goods, as in the good is good no matter what. And it stays like that. It's very similar to the Mu'tazili position of i'tizal in Aqidah, right? Where the Mu'tazila say, who the people who do wasatiyya with me? What do they say? Islam, Munzir, Abdurrahman, Abdullah, Muhammad. Guys, I want you guys to get up right now and leave the class. Manar, you were part of it too? Wasatiyya? Tartil, you were too? Yeah? What's the position of Mu'tazila on akhlaq? On التحسين والتقبيح? Yes. Come on, guys. What's the position of تحسين والتقبيح? Of morality, of ethics? Yes, purely rational. See, the brother who didn't take it. 40 hours. 40. So the Mu'tazili position is a purely rationalist position to say that they are also in line with that goods are only essential. So you can know morality purely through rationality. You can know morality purely through rationality without revelation. And revelation simply comes to just further affirm that. Do you get what I'm saying? And so lying is wrong forever and is evil in all circumstances. Right. So even if you're hiding somebody upstairs, like a fugitive, right, who is being wrongly accused and is going to be killed wrongly, and he comes running into your house, he goes, this is a classic example, by the way. So he goes running into your house, goes up into upstairs. The fuqaha say what happens now if the people come and they say, is this person upstairs? Right. The Mu'tazili will say you have to tell the truth. Because in any scenario, lying is evil, it is qabih. Aqliyan, rationally, okay, and Kant says the same thing, right? That it is evil in all case scenarios, and so you need to tell him irrespective of the consequence. So there's no consequences involved, right? Now, then on the other side you have consequentialists, which is a type of utilitarianism. So consequentialism is a more general term. And utilitarianism is a specific type of it, which is the ends justify the means of liberty, right? That you tell me the ends and I will tell you the means, right? So bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki was necessary because it was the means to end the war of World War II. Do you see how on their paradigm you're starting to say, wait, hold on, what? Like there would have been more bloodshed, more killing, because the Japanese, they would say this. They would say they are the most stubborn people in this world. They will not stop, which is true. I don't think they would have stopped, right? Until you bomb them absolutely to smithereens, right? And so they justified bombing civilian cities to nothingness by a consequentialist utilitarian perspective, okay? And so this is why propaganda has never been a problem either for them. And they will justify it. They'll say, listen, if it achieves my goal, which is to get a war going in Iraq, then Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. Right? He has weapons of mass destruction. Even if everybody knows it's a lie, they will go off of this until they get their results. Just like how Blinken, when he's still in office, this Khabith, what did he do? He had clear reports that the Israelis were targeting civilians in Gaza when the war first started, and he lied blatantly. He blinked like he is blinking, right? And he said, no, we have no reports that say that the Israelis are targeting civilians, right? So why? It's totally fine, because for them, ends justify the means, right? Yeah. Arguably, also the Asha'ira also have a level of obviously, alhamdulillah, it's not as disgusting, or it's good, but they have a level of this is what will they say the ends justify the means. The position of Sunnah is both are right? We do not truly know everything rationally, yet we know universals, right? And those are affirmed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sharia, right? And consequences are taken into consideration as well. Masalih and mafasid are also part of the paradigm of ahkam, which is left up to the mujtahideen and the muftis. Do you guys follow what I'm saying, right? So both are taken into consideration. And practically in Islam, this has always been the case. Both are taken into consideration, right? So you have to leave aside theoretical, philosophical engagements for sometimes, and then you have to look at how things are done. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? Can I leave for anything? Okay, well done. So because you all are new and you haven't attended any of the classes, you generally speaking from the adab of a majlis of ilm is you ask permission before getting up, right? It's not me, it's just in general, right? Okay, so yeah, you can lie if it means the ends. Yes?
How do we just use textbook like the rationality for that? Like how do they define what's rational?
The means, the ends.
So like
Yeah.
they say lines.
Yeah.
Say things are rational.
No, for them, it's beyond rational. For them, no, the Mu'tazila say that it's rational. Sorry. The deontological, they say it goes beyond rational. It just is. So you need to accept it. So like in all, it becomes a universal. So in all case scenarios, evil is evil. Do you get what I'm saying, right? Good is good. And I don't need to justify it anymore. Like it goes beyond rationality. Well, that's what's funny, right? So if you go into the UN and you talk about human rights, once it's passed in the UN, it's treated deontologically, right? So you can't ask the question anymore of is it good or bad? It just is good or bad. That's it. It's become essential. Right? It is essential. It's not up for debate, right? So it's funny how wherever it benefits them, they just go whichever way they go. It's like so okay. Now next one. The theories of values, classical liberalism, right? These are fundamental liberal values, and we are a liberal state, right? This is classical liberalism. The negative liberty, these are our values, you stick with these, right? Modern liberalism, they do not claim any fundamental liberal values, right? They don't say that we have fundamental liberal values. Their justifications of liberal laws are through personal values like Christianity or whatever they want, etc. So whatever they want should be pushed into the public realm and accepted. So if you can lobby for gender rights, you lobby for gender identity rights. If you're a Christian, you can lobby for what you want. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? And so they say nothing is like part of liberalism per se. It's whatever we can get enforced, like whatever we can get passed. Once it's passed, it's law, and we deal with that from there, right? But this is not to say that there's no social reform that is occurring in the sense of how the self is being re-established or re-understood. It's being psychologized. It's being sexualized. It's a Freudian concept of the self where, your orientation is a value comes from within, right? And so from within that paradigm, you are now finding meaning. And this is just taken for granted today, right? Like you just take for granted the fact that as long as you're psychologically happy, that's what matters. So to hell with your parents and their rights and the community. So you get to choose what you want the way you want it. And that's it. Like you don't get to tell me how I practice my spirituality because I'm not about organized religion. I do my own thing, right? And I do whatever makes sense to me. And whatever makes sense to me is what makes me happy, what gives me psychological happiness, right? What satisfies me. So there's a very, very different understanding, sorry, it's a lot, of self, right? And we don't have time to get into it, right? I will refer a book. There's two books by the same author. One is a dumbed down version. One is a more philosophical approach. It's called A Strange New World, in quite opposition to A Brave New World by, who is A Brave New World by? Any literature people here? Who is A Brave New World by?
Aldous Huxley.
Huxley, very good. That's by Huxley. And Huxley was a perennial. That was his project. And so stories are a very powerful medium of ideas. Stories are a very powerful medium of ideas. So novels are not neutral. When you read a novel, see, it's not just reading, no, you're reading this person's philosophy into it. So the Romantics, they didn't write philosophy. The Romantics, they didn't write philosophy. They wrote literature. They wrote literature. So it's not a value fee area, right? Anyways, so he wrote a book. It's called A Strange New World. It talks about this. The more philosophical book of it, the asl. This is an ikhtisar. This is a summary. The asl that delves into the philosophical is called The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, right? By the same author, whose name evades me at this point. Truman, that's his name. Truman. Carl Truman, right? So refer to those, or we can have this discussion at some other time in another class. Okay. Next point of khilaf, social ontology. Classical liberalism is atomistic. Okay. Remember we talked about atomism before? Or we didn't talk about it. I just showed you that these are some features of modernity. Atomism is one of those features. Society is just individuals. So the way we think, the way we perceive society is individuals. Okay? So that's all. We just think of them as individuals. And so they can't do anything if they are trying to hurt themselves, right? In terms of like the political impact of that is that we can't do anything to them if they're trying to hurt themselves, but we'll intervene if you try to hurt someone else. So in a classical liberal theory, suicide is not wrong per se, right? And you see this in the writings of John Stuart Mill and others, right? But, you know, but a more organicist, as in a more socialist organicist perspective, is the individual is a part of society, so the individual matters as a whole. So you're looking at society, you do recognize that society, social ontology, is built up of communities and people, and they work together, and they have effects on one another, right? So in this scenario, no, suicide is wrong, okay, because a father killing himself is thus hurting his family, right? Okay. So the laws of suicide that Trudeau brought into play in the past 2 years of euthanasia, where he legalized it, right? On what theory of liberty does that stand on in terms of social ontology? Is it classical or is it organicist? It's classical. Very good. Because euthanasia is then dictated on classical terms of liberty, that free like true liberty and freedom can be expressed by taking your own life, right? And that can be done whenever you want to. And the new rules literally say if you don't need cause, you don't need anything, you can literally, for a mental health issue, kill yourself, right? And the numbers are not being foretold properly as to how many people have taken their own lives. Right. So like, oh, we've ruined the economy, you know, we've done all this stuff. So here you go. Instead of fixing the medical system, go kill yourself, right? This literally is absurd. Canada is so dystopic. It's so dystopic. It's actually crazy. Right? Yeah, but at least nowhere else is suicide legal. No. This is the first country to legalize euthanasia at this level, like in a very without any standards, without you can apply for it, you can give any reason for it. It doesn't need to be you're on the stages of death, and then you decide that this is an option or you might be permitted. No, it's like you can give your reasons and you can take your life. If you just realize you had cancer, you can go and take your life, right? If you know whatever you're going through, you can take your life. Like it's illegal. It's not like South Korea where people take their lives because they have like a breakup, and it's still illegal. But over there it's illegal.
We're dead.
Yeah, but the point is the perception here, right? We're talking about how the perception, and we're talking about ethics. We're talking about what's right and wrong. They're saying this is right, so this is morally okay. Right? So this is in line with a classical liberal perspective. Okay. Next one. Come to the questions at the end, inshallah. Okay. Justice for all. What does that mean? There's commutative justice, which is classical. So commutative justice, this is not commies, right? Commutative justice is distribution of legal fairness. So equality in front of the law. Okay. And institutionalizing it within the framework. So the framework is legally equal for everybody. There's no exceptions. There's nobody's above the law. You hear that, right? Nobody's above the law. That's awesome. But what is the law? So this is we'll get into that critique when we actually get to the critique section. So there's no hierarchy of kings, no serfdom, no slavery, no communism. There's no caste system, right? It's that the law is equal for all. Okay. Then you have distributive justice, which is modern. So distributive justice, which is modern liberalism, right? Which is distributing resources amongst disadvantaged people and taking people out of disadvantages. So if you're a disadvantaged people, then it is incumbent upon the liberal state to take you out of your disadvantage, right? This is a different conception of justice. So the ones who say it's commutative are more like right-wing, right? They're more like, oh, no, like, you know, everybody, like, you know, there's no such thing as minimum wage and, you know, the extreme, obviously, I'm not saying all of them, like everybody's on a spectrum, but what's it called, you know, stuff like that. Do you guys follow what I'm saying, right? Like it's all about being fair in front of the law. This is why, you know, the people who are more rich, they're like, no, why should I have to pay more tax than everybody else? Everybody should be able to pay the same amount of tax. There should be a cap on how much tax can be taken. Also, I hate taxes. It should be like Texas, tax-free, right? That's the theory of a commutative justice. Okay, while a distributive would be more like, okay, well, no charity towards the disabled. You know, having you know, like the NWP say, having a universal dental program, right? Stuff like that. This is more on the distributive justice. We need to take the money and then separate. As you guys can already see, like within Islam, there's concepts of both, subhanAllah, right? It's the Sharia is holistic and complete, right? It's for all people in all times, right? So anyways. Okay, next point of disagreement is scope for religious-based exceptions as well as multiculturalism, right? So the difference lies in how far you can push liberal core values to religion and culture. That's where the difference is. How far can you push the envelope of liberal theory, right? Full liberty of religion and culture secures free religious and cultural practice and thought. That's it. Like, that's the general mandate, right? I could say whatever I want, you know, freedom of speech. You know, like how Elon Musk is propagated. He's propped up as somebody who is an advocate of total free speech, right? And everybody is like, oh my God, like losing their mind, right? That's what he's supposedly supposed to be standing for, right? But yet somehow reporting on Twitter is now allowed again, right? Like in the sense of like, if anybody seemed to be radical, then they can be taken off. But according to Elon Musk, like whatever Elon Musk dictates to be radical or not, right? Anyways, the second is religious and cultural needs to be restricted to maintain core liberal values, right? And also, mind you, like, again, I keep saying I'm not, like, the right and left are not proper representations because they have interlocking on both sides, right? So let's take the example of a theory of values. Oh, sorry, the meaning of liberty. Meaning of liberty, right? We said that generally speaking, the right is more classical, it's more negative than the left, which is more positive. But that's not true. That's not true. Because what do the Trump supporters say? Bring back jobs to America, right? Control policy and tariffs and companies and corporate law to make American companies come back into America to give us jobs. What type of perception of liberty is that? No, it's positive. You're saying to enable my liberties, I need government to do X, Y, Z. While a negative one is closer to anarchistic than it is to control of government. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? Okay. Okay. So it's not like, oh, fleshed out left, right. No, it's not. It's not. You know. And if you think that, that means you don't realize what's happening, right? Okay. Yeah. Some exceptions. So religious cultures need to be restricted to maintain core liberal values, right? You see this happening more on the right as well. You see this on the right as well. Why do women get to wear hijab, right? There shouldn't be like, why are these people allowed into our country? Do you follow what I'm saying, right? So it's not like, oh, they're all about liberty. No, they're like, no, free for the whites. That's fine. That's fine. For you, no, you get out of here. Right? So it's not like, oh, the right represents something. No, there's a lot of intermixing of these things. It's not like that, right? Religious and cultures to be restricted to maintain core liberal values, right? Both the left and the right do this. Both the left and the right do this, right? So the left will do this in cases of like gender identity, and these types of things, right? While the right will do it in other areas, like have a problem with you building more masjids, giving you more problems to get permits. That's what masjids complain about when the right is in power. What do they complain about when the left is in power? These things. Do you follow what I'm saying? Right. But whenever one is in power, especially because we're like a more naive community, we're more recent, we're not philosophically adept, nor are we politically adept, right? Yeah, you have people swinging right, left, right, left, right, left. Do you get what I'm saying, right? Without any proper engagement or understanding, right? So some exceptions, Sikhs holding their knives. This was an exception that was given to Sikhs. Sikhs get a lot of exceptions, right? In comparison to Muslims, right? They're allowed to keep knives on them in public, even here in Canada, right? Because part of their religion. It'd be funny if a Muslim had one, right? Right. Amish children, their kids' education is up to the age of 14. That's the point they have to send their kids to school for. After that, they are not legally mandated to send their kids to school after that, right? Because again, school is an institution of the state for statecraft. And so it became the only way they got people to force their kids into school was to enforce it. Because people were like, well, my kids are necessary to run my farm. This is how we live. He learns farming from me. He doesn't have to go learn letters. What does he need that for? No, for industrialization and for the modern nation state to work, they had to mandate institutions. So policing, statecraft, this is all part of it, right? Education institutions, other institutions, this was all part of it to gain full control and sovereignty over the people. Right? Okay, so the Amish, they're an exception. They only need to go to school up till the age of 14, while the law says 16 for everybody else. So if a Muslim says, no, actually, I don't want to send my kid to school, I want them to go to Dar al-Ulum, right? Go through that. If the Dar, like back in like the early 2000s, if you took your kid out of school, you didn't send them to school at that age, you're in big trouble even today. Unless whatever you're doing also has homeschooling with it, you're legally not allowed to. You're legally not allowed to, right? And it is enforced in many states. And you get fined and you can go to prison for it as well. So this is a normal occurrence. Okay. Moving on, last point of khilaf. No, did we finish all of them, guys? Yeah, let's just leave that out. I don't have time for that right now. Okay, good. Yeah, I left that out on purpose. Yeah, good. Yeah, okay. This is all according to plan. Okay. Liberalism. There's different types. Social liberalism, political liberalism, economic liberalism. If you guys already haven't figured, let's just say it. There's social liberalism, there's political liberalism, and there is economic liberalism in the sense of like how it goes about. Okay. Social liberalism is a political ideology that emphasizes individual freedoms and equal opportunities. This is about everybody having equal access. It is defined by the harm principle, which we don't have time to get into. Right. It is defined by the harm principle, that no harm should come to anybody. Right. Yeah, no, we don't have time to get into that. Now, and so part of that now is to enable that. What do you have? You have these like multicultural quotas that you need to meet, right? So if you're Black, you're this, then you get a priority. That's why when you're applying for a job, what do? They ask you what race you are, right? There's way too many qualified brown people, Arabs and Pakistanis and so on. So it doesn't really matter anymore. You can click it. But the moment you're indigenous, okay, that makes a difference. Follow what I'm saying, right? Or something of that nature. So this is where that comes into play. You have political liberalism. It's a political philosophy that emphasizes individual liberty, limited government, and the protection of individual rights and freedoms. Strands from hedonistic principles and utilitarianism. Right? It's all about getting the end goal, making sure people are as free as possible, do whatever they want. It's hedonistic. Yani, whatever you want to do, go ahead, do it. Right? So it's more anarchic. It's more anarchic. Right? Economic liberalism, its principles are upon competition and self-interest. What is it upon? Competition and self-interest. This is more in line with globalization, economic globalization, stuff like that. Make people do what they're good at. So if the Chinese are good at like cheap labor stuff, then export it all to there. If the Japanese were good at technological stuff, put it there. Now it's the Indians, so give it there. So that was the concept of competition and self-interest. Whoever can do the best job, do it. But now all of a sudden that the Chinese are making better EV cars and are selling them for a lot cheaper, well, then all of a sudden you have a 200% tax on import of any of their cars. Just a coincidence, right? And so this is more in line with positive liberty, not even liberty at this point, it's just self-interest, and it's about survival and growth in terms of the world order. Like, it's just survival at this point of world order. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Here. Anyways, now, history of human rights. Am I supposed to cover this? Yes, I am. Idea of natural rights in ancient Greek and Romans. No, I'm not. Never mind, guys. Sorry about this. Stoics, right? Based on rights. Yeah, no, never mind that. Sorry. Yeah, because I'm skipping a lot of the theoretical stuff. So like the harm principle arguments back and forth, some of the genealogy, like the growth of the history of the ideas and other stuff like that. So we're not going to go there, inshallah. I took them out for a reason. Yeah, I skipped like 50 slides here. Okay, let's do a quick historical account, or you guys want to take a 2-minute break? 2-minute break? Walk around? Yeah, 3-minute break. 2 minutes? ماشي يلا 2-minute break يلا بسم الله. طيب الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله عليه وسلم محمد وعلى اله وصحبه اجمعين وبعد. A history of the modern Western world. You guys can think of this to be in line with everything we just said. This is the general structure that you would read anywhere for an account of secularism, modernism, liberalism, you name it. Any of the ancient isms that start from the 1500s all start with this history because they're all part of the Enlightenment project. They are not separate from the Enlightenment project. They are all projects of modernity. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Right? And yeah, now, طيب. So we start with the Renaissance in the 15th century. The 15th century is what year? When does it start? 1400s. The 15th century is the 14th. Give me 2 major incidents of the 15th century. Fall of Constantinople. ممتاز. Fall of Constantinople. What else? Huh? Sorry? Go ahead. What else? Okay, so we could just call that the fall of Constantinople. According to Europeans, for us, it's a victory. It's an opening, right? Then what else? Yes. Huh? No. Okay. Anyways, the fall of Constantinople.
Andalus.
Ya salam, Ahmed. Lillahi darruk. The fall and the demise of Andalusia and the Muslims. They're just a few years apart from one another. And then right after that, the so-called finding of the New World. The so-called finding of the New World. These all happen within the 14th century. This kicks off, and we don't have time to like go into how they're connected, but these things, they kick off a renaissance due to the findings of the works from Andalusia and the money coming in from the New World and the new routes that Portugal has made from South Africa to bypass the Muslims and to continue colonization. All these things happening at the same time are becoming motives, factors that are moving towards what? The Renaissance, right? And we said the Renaissance can be formulated back in the Vienna Circle in Italy, okay? Primarily talking about Aristotle moving away from Aristotelian philosophy, moving into a critical lens beyond the Aristotelian paradigm, okay? Or at least starting with how to understand Aristotle, and from there moving on forward, okay? 16th century, the Protestant Reformation. The 1500s onwards, what happens? The Protestant Reformation. 17th century, the scientific revolution. Who was a major figure of the 17th century?
I think
Newton's 18.
Voltaire?
Galileo, very good. Who else? Who else? Sorry?
Voltaire.
Voltaire is philosophical, but also scientific. Yes, very good. Again, at this point, you can't differentiate. Natural philosophy is the same as philosophy. There's no such thing as like pure science, or science in the modern sense of science, right? Okay, moving on to the 18th century, they start gorging on philosophy. Who is from the major figures of this era? 18th century.
David Hume.
David Hume. Who else? John Locke. Who else? I'm looking for somebody very particular. Hume, sure. Hume can be considered, but somebody more pivotal. Huh? No.
Descartes?
Nietzsche is from the area. Yeah. Nietzsche is from, yeah. Descartes a bit before. Who else?
Hobbes?
Darwin yes. Darwin's late 18th century. No. Sorry, Darwin's 19th century.
Thomas Hobbes?
Huh?
Thomas Hobbes?
These are all people that are very important, but to the general history of modernity, who's very central. Like without him, we wouldn't be making sense of the way, like the path modernity took was because of one individual philosophically, effectively. He is the mujaddid, he is the imam of
Immanuel Kant?
Immanuel Kant. His philosophy is central, pivotal to everything that comes later. Because he is the mujaddid of modernity and philosophy, right? He's a very challenging read, right? His is the edifice of the jam' between the gathering, the synthesis between empiricism and idealism, right? And he brings his way, and that way becomes central to all thought that comes after. Whatever you touch, Kant is a part of it after that. Okay. Funny enough, he never left his city. Neither did he ever get married. The poor man. He had a very miserable life, right? This is what happens. Then you start thinking about the world, and like you're just in it for yourself, and khalas, على كل حال. So he has some scathing remarks against women, and I think we know why. Yeah. Okay. What else? You also have to understand that most people join the modern worldview without realizing that they may extend from a Christian starting point. A lot of people, they don't say, I'm Christian, but everything they're saying is impacted by the Christian worldview that they are inheriting or that they are part of a discussion of to this very point, right? This is why you need to be careful. You need to be careful about if you're entering this discussion, the way we said, without really knowing what's happening, right? You're entering into a family dynamics and you have no idea how they function. You follow what I'm saying? And they're asking you, is mother right or father right? Hold on, I'm not your son. Wait. Like, and you're part of that discussion. You get what I'm saying, right? This is a family, and they've had their discussions. And it's been ongoing for half a millennium, if not more. Right? And so you have to be very careful about taking on ideas, taking on discussions without even knowing what you're doing. Okay? So anyways. Now. So Renaissance is important because you go from a theocentric worldview to a anthropocentric worldview. So this is one of the pivotal factors. Theocentric, God-centric to man-centric. So you go to anthropocentric worldview. All right. The Reformation, there's many things. Remember, I said that the unintended Reformation is a really good book to go through. I intend to go through it as well. Allah, I haven't gone through it, but it's highly recommended. The Reformation movement against the Catholic Church, right? Revolting against the church as the church had gained too much power and wealth. This belief of individual beliefs in religion belief is a private matter, not a state issue, has some basis in the Reformation movement. This has some basis in the Reformation movement, right? Then you have the scientific revolution of the 17th century. So you're moving away from society-centric to human-centric worldview. Part of this is the whole Galileo issue, going from the world being, the world, the center. Very good. So being heliocentric, okay, and so on. And then in the 18th century, you have like a boom in philosophy. You try to rearrange the ontological worldview, like what exists and what does not exist, and limit our understanding of the natural empirical world. Okay, only to that. Halas, this is happening in the 18th century, restricting knowledge to science only or what can be measured. Okay. In the 19th century, then, you have secularization of the European mind. West goes global, right? It's in the 19th century where you have the biggest boom of colonization. Biggest boom of, at this point, most of the world is now being colonized by Britain and the Western powers. The race of Africa occurred in the 19th century. All these things are happening in the 19th century. Then you have the modern world starting from the 20th century with the competition of the different worldviews through the world wars. The world wars are a competition of empire and worldviews. So different madahib within Western thought competing against one another to see who will come out superior. I build a government like this, you build a country like this, we're going to fight one another and see who comes out on top. Okay. What else is happening at this point? So in Russia, what happens? The revolution. The Tsar is killed. What happens? The Communist Party comes into power. The specific Bolshevik party, I think that's how it's pronounced, comes into power, right? Across the world, same thing's happening. Austria-Hungary, what's happening to it? Split. So you go from the Holy Roman Empire, and Poland splits, and what happens? Slovakia splits, split. So you get the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is just two countries, right? Then what happens? Then you have the postmodern world. And then you have the world wars, World War I, World War II, and we live in a World War II post-era, which is crumbling on itself at the moment, right? This is the 21st century. It's postmodern in the sense of people are realizing that the modern worldview is to be criticized. What the answer is up for grabs. Postmoderns have their idea. There's other ideas out there. It's called metamodernism. Right? There's all sorts of things. Some of these things are very recent, like in the past 2 years, 3 years. Ever-changing world. They believe that we're constantly changing. We're moving into something else now, right? No foundations. There's no principles to govern life, to govern anything. Everything is up for grabs. This is how everything feels now, right? There's nothing stable anymore. You're constantly up. At least people before felt like modernism was true. Believe in it. You can. Not even that's there anymore, right? So that's the kind of flux that we're in. There's no fixed worldview. Every 10, 20 years, things are changing. Every 10, 20 years, things are constantly changing. We are not in the 2010s, very clearly. We are not in the 2000s. We're definitely not in the 1980s. In the 1960s, oh my God, that's unrecognizable from the Western 1960s. Very different worlds, constantly changing every 10, 20 years. There's nothing stable. Nothing stable. This is another line to represent that, right? You have the Protestant Reformation. You have Westphalia, 1648. We already mentioned Westphalia. Westphalia had to do with following your Monarch. If your monarch is Protestant, you have to be Protestant. If your monarch is Catholic, you have to be Catholic. This was the agreement of Westphalia, right? This was their solution to the wars. It didn't stop them though, because the French hated the Protestants. So the amount of times they killed their own monarchs and got them out of power because they didn't want Protestant power, way too many times after that, right? They didn't really stop the bloodshed, right? Because again, their vision was totalitarian. Like Christianity, like the way Western Christianity was like this. There is no space for being the other. There is no other. You don't have an other. There's no place for him. Then you have Thomas Hobbes and John Locke in the 17th century. So this is more particular to liberalism. So we're talking about Hobbes and Locke in the 17th century. You have Industrial Revolution in the 18th century. You have American Revolution in the 1783. And you have the French Revolution in 1789. And these are, after this, liberalism has been on the rise. Okay, it's only recently that people started questioning it. So 1789, 18th century onwards, liberalism is on the rise. World War I, modern liberalism, and Wilson's liberalism, these come into play. We don't really have time to get into the differences. 1960s and 70s is the sexual revolution, liberal feminism and multiculturalism come into play. This is just a continuation of the, not the political, but the ideological liberalism continuing. So the sexual revolution is not something coming out of nowhere. You know, many people say it's the invention of condoms and birth control that caused the sexual. No, it's not. It's the continuous degradation in the restructuring of not only society, but what it means to be a human being and an individual and selfhood itself that reaches the sexual revolution. And we are just a continuation of it. So gender politics identity is not new. It's just a continuation of the sexual revolution, right? Where are we? Now, after that, you have Thatcherism, Reaganism, that's neoliberalism, right? In the 1980s. And then you have, Fukuyama, post-Cold War globalization, the end of history and civilization, which he called it. Right? You had some really bizarre theories coming up, like world will come to an end, history is coming to an end as you know it. Wherever there are two McDonald's in the world, people will not fight one another because people will want to go to McDonald's, right? So the liberal world has won. Literally, these are theories. Wallahi, these are theories, right? So you have the world order has won, the liberals have won. They literally thought that things will never change in their heyday, right? The liberals, right? The Americans. So just capitalism, liberalism across the world. Everybody's just gonna accept it, and this will be the new world. And this is the end of the world. Khalas, no more ideas after this. Then you have Trump rise of white nativism and populism, which is showing the breaking of this theory, people pressing back on it, feeling unease, and people reverting back to going back towards World War I mentality, World War II mentality, and the cycle continues. Okay. Now, this we are done. Now we will do a short break of 4 minutes, inshallah, and we will come back. Give me a second, yeah. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. May Allah accept this action as worship. May Allah accept all of your time here today as worship of the highest caliber and degree, which gets you closer to Allah, closer to Jannah, closer to His pleasure, away from His wrath, and away from Jahannam. Ameen. Now, so we are on the final part, which I promised, which we got to. Yes? Section 2. An account of liberalism. Part 3. Criticism of liberalism. Okay? And we're going to be doing we're going to be doing a primarily Islamic focused critique. We don't have time to do an academic critique. We already did some academic, like we did some post-liberal criticisms. I just mentioned them in passing here and there, but we don't have time to do like a proper, okay, what does this academic have to say? What does that sociologist have to say? What does this blah, blah, blah? What do Marxists have to say? What are Marxist critiques? What are feminist critiques? Feminists have critiques of them, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't have time to go into any of that. We're just going to do a general critique from an Islamic perspective, inshallah, and we'll keep it at that. Bismillah. So part of this will also be just quickly discussing it. So a bit of this is revision. So we said there's philosophical liberalism and there's political liberalism. We've already discussed what philosophical liberalism looks like, did we not? We already discussed what political liberalism looked like. So now we are going to focus on philosophical liberalism. So we already just spoke about the mechanisms that are there at a general at a level of state policy and stuff like that. Now we're gonna zoom out a little bit. So we zoomed in. Now we're zooming out, and we're saying, what does it look like philosophically, right? And critiques from that vantage point, from that high level perspective. Okay. Usually, political liberalism is often contrasted with conservatism, but we've already kind of critiqued that a little bit. We said that's not really true, right? Philosophical liberalism is broader and more comprehensive, encompassing both political and conservative liberalism. So first, we need to acknowledge that there's a human limitation, right, of knowledge, which we've already discussed. This, like, if you're saying we as the human being can figure out everything about ourselves, well, then that is very, very problematic, right? Like, as in, we don't have complete knowledge. If you did have complete knowledge and complete power, then you'd be God. But you don't have complete power, nor neither complete knowledge to be able to make those types of decisions. So you're epistemically very limited as a human being, right? So to make yourself the sovereign, or to make the will of the people sovereign, is innately deficient. Innately deficient. An example of this is the famous. I don't know if this man actually existed, but his stories are famous. Do you guys know who I'm talking about? It's called the Sheikh. No. His name starts with a K. He has sarcastic stories, funny stories. You teach them to kids. Huh? Similar. Huh. It's very well known in the Arab and Pakistani communities. Stories. You're taught them as kids.
Sheikh, what was the question? Sorry.
It's fair enough. I'm actually forgetting his name, to be honest, right? That's why I'm asking you guys, right? Name starts with a Khay, with a Kha, Khwaja, or something like that. No? Anyways, we'll get to it.
An example story of this?
Yeah, so here's the story. The story is, he says, he looks up at a very big tree, and it's an acorn tree, right? And he says, this is such a massive tree, right? Why are such little acorns growing on it? If I was God, right? He's supposed to be dumb, right? Like, yeah, that's the type of caricature that he has historically. If I was God, I'd put pumpkins there so that people can't reach them, so they're safe, right? And then right after he says it, the acorn comes and falls on his head, and he says, Alhamdulillah, I'm not God, else I'd be dead, right? As in, what's it called? My knowledge is so limited that if it was going to drop on my head and it was a pumpkin, then it would have killed me. You follow what I'm saying, right? So there's a massive limitation to our knowledge. Humans can be effective at solving narrow problems, but often cause unintended consequences in other areas, right? We try to solve one problem, we make dozens of other problems, thinking that we're God, we play God, right? If you play God, you're going to get hurt because you're not God, right? So the invention of automobiles solved transportation issues, but introduced environmental concerns such as emissions. Right? Now you have the world trying to figure out emissions. They keep trying to make other cars, make EVs, lithium batteries, extremely horrible for the environment. Making them is detrimental. Getting rid of them is even worse. And we're still pumping them out because it serves a political agenda. Okay. Caution in religious matters. So we need to recognize that these things, especially if they have to do with belief of the world, and dealing with the world, you need to take it from divine revelation. Right? This is just like a summary of what we did in the first parts of it. So I'm just trying to revise this a little bit with you guys before we get into the crux of it. So we're doing it at both levels. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? Okay. Human created philosophies, unlike divine guidance, are inherently flawed and may lead to misguidance, generally do lead to misguidance. Okay. Human origin of ideologies. Philosophical liberalism, like other ideologies, is a product of human thought. It's not divine. You cannot treat liberty, fraternity, and solidarity, the way the French put it, as lawh al-mahfuz, that cannot be touched or changed or worked with, and treated like the same way. Wallahi, you hear them say these words, you hear them, and there's a veneration. There's like this taqdees, holiness attached to it, sacredness. And No matter what you do, these principles are untouchable. They are essential. They are beyond question. Okay. Good and bad elements. Liberalism contains both positive and negative aspects, excelling in some areas while faltering in other areas, right? Naturally, you know, this is a qaida that the ulama always state, and it's a beautiful one. I still remember it. My sheikh, I remember clearly him saying that if if falsehood was totally ugly, then nobody would ever follow it. If batil was totally ugly and had no elements of truth, nobody would follow it. That's precisely why they follow it, because it has elements of truth and it has elements of falsehood. This also it should be a caution for people who say, listen, I'm going to take the good, leave the bad. Are you equipped to be able to make that decision, to leave the good and take the bad? If you're not, then you can't say that. Okay. Difficulty in evaluating liberalism. Philosophical liberalism is so ingrained in modern society that it's difficult to step aside. Same thing as modern worldviews, dominant since the French Revolution. Now, the liberal theology is about individual autonomy. We've already spoken about that. Personal freedom, self-determination. The highest expression of autonomy. So when we talk about autonomy, this word autonomy, do you guys even know what that means? Auto means self. Nomis means no law. Autonomous, no law. For myself, no law. Nothing can rules me. That's literally what it means from Greek. Nothing rules me. I am myself the highest judge of myself. Nothing comes in the way of that. Autonomous, autonomy. Right. And so personal freedom is self-ownership. That's the idea here. Self-ownership, where one is free to do what they want without external interference. Any external authority, such as family, tradition, or religion, is seen as an obstacle to individual freedom. Your religion stops you. Your family stops you. Your tradition stops you. These are all negatives. Do you follow what I'm saying? Because they're stopping you from achieving your personal self-ownership without law. This creates tension within societal hierarchies and traditional structures of authority, as demonstrated in pop culture. Right? Well, here's a good example. Can you guys give me a single classical Disney movie where there is a positive father figure? Sorry? No. Think hard. Yeah.
But he dies.
He dies. I don't know, but yeah, he's not there. He's not part of the story. He dies. He dies. She dies.
No, except for me.
Oh my God! Wow, big difference, right? He's a deadbeat. Okay. What else? What are you talking about? Like, no, there's no father there. Which positive father figure? Huh? How is he? It's a frog. How is he a positive father figure? Now, there's a reason for that, right? Because fathers become detriments to your self-ownership and self-autonomy, right? It's like, no, you're not going to get married to that random person you met on the street, right? And oh my God, I gotta etc. Just because he put a sandal on your foot does not make him equipped to be your husband. Right? That's not so basically traditional understandings of liberalism are require power to be out of the story. Part of that are parents, part of that are fathers, and so on and so forth. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? Is that clear? Right? So, and this is cliche. You don't find any major classical story that has a positive father figure, right? Who survives through it, especially stories for children and other things. Right? Okay. Now, as we know, we serve Allah. That is our purpose. We are the stewards of Allah. We do not have our own autonomy. We have free will that is derived from God's will. We have free will. We have free will that is underneath the qada and qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, power in the ordinance of God subhanahu wa ta'ala, jalla thana'uhu wa azza dhikruh. Right? So ours is conditional. Right? The human body is seen as a trust. It's an amana. We are stewards of God on this earth. Right? The body is an amana. Right? You don't say my body, my will. Meri jism, meri marzi. That you can't do that because it's not your jism. And it's not your choice, right? It's not. So true freedom in Islam comes not from doing what one desires, but from submission to Allah's will, aligning with the higher purpose of life as defined by divine revelation. So we have to remember roots over outcomes, right? If you identify the roots, we've been talking about this, you can come to specific outcomes. Okay, so let's forget about what side you take on abortion, same-sex marriage. These things, you're not going to get to any conclusion because you're not addressing the roots here. Our roots are fundamentally different than theirs. Their roots we've seen are weak. They hold no ground. They hold no water. They are a bad tree on bad soil, and it will never give you good fruit. Once the foundational differences are understood, downstream consequences will naturally follow. Naturally, you'll be able to figure out where you go from there. Problem is, if you don't understand the roots, you're not going to understand the branches. You're going to keep going at the branches and you'll never understand what tree I'm on, what is it doing. Okay, now response to historical conditions of Europe. We've already discussed this, specific European context, underlying values, okay? So the first thing is religious uniformity in pre-liberal Europe. We've already discussed this. There was a uniformity and a totalitarian value. Everybody needs to be the same. Everybody needs to be the same. There is no space for otherness. There is no space for otherness. You're either a Catholic Christian or you don't exist in Europe. And you see this happening with how many people? The Jews, constantly being eradicated and genocided throughout European history. And yet, apparently, they don't carry the weight for that today. They're not the ones who are extremists, genociders, the Europeans, right? Likewise, who else? What other minority in Europe was persecuted? Very good. The Romans, known as the Gypsies, generally speaking, in Disney and other places. These were also constantly attacked, pushed away. They never had a place to stay. The reason for this was why? They are the other. There's no space for them. How long have the Jews been in Palestine and Iraq for? Oh, that's right. Ever since Umar radiallahu ta'ala, when he conquered them and invited them back. Everywhere across the Muslim world, they have been there since the beginning. They have stayed there. They have been integrated. And there is social mobility. There was no social mobility in Europe. There's no freedom of religion, nor religious diversity. Okay? There was no concept of there being another. Whoever rules the realm, owns the realm, and he has complete sovereignty. The Leviathan of Hobbes is the ruler of Europe. So religious uniformity was enforced, leading to practice like the Inquisition in witch hunts. You don't hear of a witch hunt in Islam. There's no inquisitions. What can you think of in Islam that has an inquisition? The only one is the Mihna of Imam Ahmed. That's earlier on by the Mu'tazila, who are not seen to be Sunni. Other than that, is there a single inquisition? No, not really. Not at that scale. Not like it's not done like that anymore. Like we don't have that concept inside, let alone with other people who we gave total legal freedom to live by themselves within our systems, rule by themselves on their own laws, let alone within the madhab having our own differences. There's so much you can study about this, right? Okay. Contrasting with Islamic religious tolerance, we have the dhimmi system, where they're allowed to live and all they have to do is give a simple tax. That's all they have to do. And they don't even need to fight for us. They don't need to fight, they don't need to defend. They're not citizens, but they get more rights than others would, as in they're protected. They don't need to fight either. They don't need to defend, but they have more rights. So as in, effectively, in some ways, they have more rights than the Muslims would in this scenario. A Muslim is forced to defend by jihad, while a dhimmi would not be forced. Okay, the concept of enforcing a singular religion was foreign to Islamic governance, unlike in European societies. By the time of Umar radiallahu ta'ala, meritocracy, sorry, I had to get that out right. Meritocracy was the way where you go by merit. In the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, there were people who were appointed, and the only thing they were appointed for was their experience. The vast majority of the tabi'een, of the successors, were either slaves or freed slaves. The ones who were governors and the greatest of scholars, all of them, the vast majority of them were freed slaves. So hold on, if that's the case, if they're being made governors, right, and they're not treated the same, and neither are they treated or understood or looked at the same way, then maybe we need another word to talk about them. And the word slave in English doesn't do them justice, because it's a very different system with very different values and very different constructs, right? So that is the case there. In Europe, you have the divine right of kingship. What do you have? The divine right of kingship. While in Islam, that's not the case. The king is the absolute monarch. He has divine right to be king. Right? He is positioned above the law. He is the law. The law doesn't apply to him. Foucault's concept of sovereign power reflects the absolute authority of monarchs to suspend or contravene law at will. That was then succeeded by the nation state's sovereignty. Die for the state, live for the state. Right? Islamic leadership and accountability. In contrast, sovereignty in Islam belongs solely to Allah, and rulers are subject to the Sharia, to the Islamic law, which cannot be suspended by human rules. Everybody functions underneath it. Everybody is there's not a single ruler that could say and justify ever in our history just to say, I suspend laws. I suspend the qada system. I suspend all of these things. No, he needed to function with them. His job was, yeah, sure, do politics, do empire, do these things. But when it came to law, he was still underneath the law and he couldn't touch it. He couldn't say, today I have made zina halal. Go ahead. Impossible. Impossible. Because he is accountable to the complete sovereignty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. True hukm, true rule, in al-hukmu illa lillah. True rule, true sovereignty is only God's. Nobody else. Nobody else has that right. Even the ruler is underneath. Even the most powerful leaders, such as the caliphs, were accountable to the law. The famous, when Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu became the caliph, what did he say? The famous story, he got up on the member, he said, I am not the best among you, so I would like your advice. If I do something wrong, tell me, guide me, correct me, stop me, don't listen to me. If I do right, follow me. If I follow the law of Allah, follow me. He's not above the law. He's a caliph, he's a steward to the Prophet. He followed the Prophet. He's a follower, he's a khalifa. Khalafa. An-Nabi. Right. Islamic rulers lacked the absolute sovereignty of European monarchs, adhering instead to the higher law of the Sharia they had to. Obviously, just like how in democracy you have certain people who are more democratic and certain people who are less democratic. Just like that, you might have certain rulers who are more Islamic and less Islamic. But does that mean that they didn't that the paradigm would just stop functioning? No, the paradigm functioned. It was there. Okay. Replacing monarchy with popular sovereignty, from absolute monarchy, you go to the will of the people, and you have things like the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence in where did this happen? In the US. Very good. In the United States of America, right? Nationalism emerged with the nation and its people becoming the new sovereign entity, represented by elected leaders or constitutional monarchies. So you either have a constitutional monarchy like Britain, or you have what? You have a constitution with like the US. What's Canada? It's constitutional monarchy that acts as its own independent nation. Okay, but it isn't technically. It's still a British state. The idea of the consent of the governed became central. So, look, everybody, you guys need to agree. This idea is you have inherited the sovereignty. You have inherited complete power. It's yours, right? Though in practice, as we know, it's just a political myth. Right? We already mentioned this. We don't have time to get into more of it. No actual consent is needed from all citizens. You don't need all citizens to agree on something. At least most places, like Canada. What happened? Trudeau came in his second election by what? I will change the election status in the way so that is more representative of the people. Because what happens now? If you have mass majority of Muslims here, that's still a lack of representation because of the number of Muslims that live in Ontario. Okay, so the seats of like Saskatchewan have way more than the seats of Ontario. Do you follow what I'm saying? Right. So, anyways, like he said, I'm gonna change things like that. I'm gonna bring in a more equal system. He backtracked on it as usual. Right. So governments maintain power even without actual consent from all citizens. That's not true. Like if tomorrow the election comes, nobody votes. Is the government going to disappear? Is Canada going to disappear? Is the nation state going to disappear? No, they're going to continue onwards. Okay, so there's certain philosophical flaws. Liberalism sought to replace the arbitrariness of monarch rule. So like monarchs could get up and say, today, I've made white haram. Tomorrow, I've made long hair wrong. Like they would do stuff like this. Like they would just get up and whatever they say, they do, right? And today, despotic rule, dictatorship, is a product of that type of Christian thinking. Right? So despotic rulers are an effect of Christian thought. Right? We didn't really have this type of despotic rulers in the Muslim world before modernity. It was only an effect of afterwards. Okay. So theorists of liberalism underestimated the state's ability to expand its power and pursue its own interests, leading to limitations in the sovereignty of the people. Liberal equality before the law. This is another idea of liberalism. What was it? Equality before the law. Remember the 6 things that we spoke about? The 4 pillars? What were the 4 pillars, guys? Very quickly. Liberty, equality. What were the 4? Huh? Democracy, charter of rights, charter of individual rights. These were the 4. So now we're talking about equality before the law. What does that mean? Equality before the law is to combat arbitrariness of monarchic power. So it's to combat that. Everybody needs to be equal among the law. The king can't go, here's the $10 million. Here's jail. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? So to combat that, and by the way, the ruler is there by God's choice. That God has chosen him. He cannot be displaced. It doesn't matter what he does. As long as he's Christian, he's Catholic, he is the ruler. Or if he's Protestant, he's the ruler, and that's fine too. After Westphalia. Okay. However, this resulted in an insensitivity to differences, as it imposed a uniform legal system on all individuals, regardless of their unique circumstances. Everybody is equal in front of the law. Not true. It's not true. Not everybody is equal in front of the law. It depends on circumstance. This is why the Qadi takes in all considerations before giving a fatwa, before making a judgment. Right? Laws are in alignment with situations. You can't say that this is the statutory law and it must be this way and only this way. If I am a Muslim, I have different laws. If he is a Jew, he has different laws. Okay? Everybody should be able to work within what they believe in faith. No, but the secular dictates that none of this is important. It's what I say. So it's inherited from the arbitrary equality of totalitarian Christianity in Western Europe, where everybody had to be the same, and even now everybody has to be the same. You can't have difference. You can't have diversity. Diversity only stretches so far. Yeah, you have a diversity day, a workshop, but other than that, everybody's the same. All I'm saying. Okay. As for pluralism, we've already mentioned this. We have the madahib, we have the dhimmis, we have true pluralism in an Islamic framework. While Christians, this is absurd to them. They had no idea, this was not possible for them. Religious minorities have distinct legal rights in Islam. They have responsibilities underneath the Sharia as well. They have rights and responsibilities, creating a flexible system that respects diversity. That's not possible underneath a modern nation state. It would break the very concept of what we know as the modern nation state. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? Right? It would have to become a different type of state for that to be the case. So Islamic law balanced fixed universals with room for individual discretion. Not that everybody must be. No, there's discretion involved. There's ijtihad. What is it? There's ijtihad. Okay. Unlike the rigid uniformity often found in liberal legal system. Okay. Like, look at Sweden. Do you guys remember last year how many kids they took away from Muslims in Sweden? Thousands. Why? My daughter can't go to a swimming class half naked. Take her away. And jail the father. And this happened. And do you know why they did it? Secularization. Come on, man. You need to fit in our liberal values. If you don't, you have no space here. You must fit. Right? You must be equal in front of the law. Everybody needs to be the same. Okay? Islamic law balanced fixed universals, unlike that system. So the limits of liberal tolerance, a central question in political theory is how should a liberal state deal with a society that is not liberal or tolerant? Okay? So if you're not a liberal state, what do? John Stuart Mill said, barbarians have no rights. We historically have always been barbarians. And do you know the word barbarian, where does it come from? Barbari. So because they would call us barbarians. Okay. What else? What other word comes from a Muslim slur? I forgot it. There's so many that there's so many. Okay. Moors. You know that one? Moors. He's a Moor. Have you read any of the classical Penguin books? The Penguin publication books? So in it, the Moor is you're such a Moor. You're such a Turk. Right? And these are slur words. You follow what I'm saying? Right? Who is a Moor? He's an Andalusian. An Andalusian Muslim. He's a Moor. He's a Moorish. Muslims. Moors. Okay. Now, so they have no rights. You don't give them no rights. You deal with them, you destroy them, you rape them, and this is justified because they're not white liberals. You know, you guys do know that John Locke, who was at the center of formulating liberalism, literally got his ideas from the sugarcane implantations of Barbados, because he had a huge share there, over 50%. So he looked at what not to do to slaves and said, this is the rights of the white man. So liberalism was only meant for the white man. It wasn't meant for the slaves in the slave trade. So you had a massive share in slave trade. These people who are seen to be fluffy, cute, like founders of liberalism, this is them. John Rawls, again, from the 1990s, distinguished between decent non-liberal societies, which deserve tolerance, and this is John Rawls from the 1990s, the savior, the rehabilitator of liberalism. He says you need to distinguish between decent non-liberal societies, which deserve tolerance, and outlaw non-liberal societies, which do not deserve tolerance. This creates a hierarchy where only certain non-liberal societies are to be tolerated while others aren't. That's why Afghanistan and its government are not even seen to be a government, because they do not fit decent non-liberal societies. They don't fit. So they don't deserve tolerance. Okay, so tolerance only goes so far. Well, the Muslims, there's a discussion by Ibn Qayyim rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi about Zoroastrians, and you all know about Zoroastrians that they would marry their siblings. There was incest, right? And they would marry their own mothers. There's an actual discussion as to whether we should be permitting it or not, because of how they rule by themselves. Like, to that extent is Islamic tolerance. Like, if you're your own community, there's a discussion whether we would even accept this practice, to that extent that it goes against the very essence of morality. Right? The point I'm trying to show you is this is how much true tolerance means, true pluralism looks like. in an Islamic Shari world. Right? Hegel believed Africa had no history. Okay, he said that they are historyless people. Okay, it's a region that has no culture, and it deserves no liberal tolerance. That's why we could do whatever we wanted there. These ideas demonstrate that liberal tolerance often has imperialistic undertones. It's an empire, where Western standards define who deemed worthy of tolerance and rights. The West gets to decide this. So it's a Western world order. Nobody else gets to decide this. They do. And whoever is their cute little bunny slave. Other than that, nobody else gets to decide. Okay? In terms of educational policies, in domestic context, liberal states impose values through public education systems. This can be seen in the US with policies on gender, sexuality, and family arrangements. Right? Education today is more about finding yourself in liberal value than it is about any sort of education. It's about indoctrination and about imposing liberal values, whatever the liberal secular state deems to be its own values that have become part of the public sphere. Okay? So they're not in discussion anymore. They are, the secular liberal state has decided this is what's right and it must be accepted. The ilan is done. The announcement is done. Everybody needs to accept it. Many citizens dissent from these teachings, but the liberal state continues to assert its versions of truth in schools. For example, Muslim parents in Montgomery County in Maryland faced resistance when they sought to exempt their children from certain lessons on gender ideology. This happened last year. You guys remember in 2023, where there was an entire back and forth, and at the ending, they lost the case. They lost the case in Maryland. And they were not allowed to have their children exempt from these studies. Do you guys remember the protests that happened across Vancouver, Calgary, here in Toronto, right? About this stuff? Kids weren't going into schools. I was called in by some of the boards to discuss this matter. I told them, well, you have to be very, very appropriate about this issue and give everybody their rights. Right? The liberal state frames dissenting religious values as teaching around the facts. Okay, what is it labeled as? Teaching around the facts. These are facts now, guys. Gender theory is fact. As soon as it becomes law, it becomes fact. Before that, it's still up for grabs, right? Implying that the state's version is the objective truth. Because the modern nation state is what resembles or what speaks to the truth of modernity. As for domestic policies for like liberalism's limits, then you have conscientious objections. So those during the Vietnam War or COVID-19 vaccine mandates, right? People were pushing back against these things, right? They face harsh consequences for refusing state-imposed policies. We've already discussed this. Muhammad Ali, he was jailed and tortured for not going to Vietnam. For saying, I'm not going to go there and kill people. Right? That was what he really got famous for on top of being a world champ. Right? He was tortured in jail for this. Right? How could you be non-American? You're being non-American. Anti-American. Muhammad Ali is that example that we just spoke of. The trucker convoy is another example. Up till today, they're being incriminated. And their leaders are still in jail. Their bails were revoked. Miskeen old women, like in their 60s, they're still stuck in jail. And their bails were revoked. In Canada. Canada is a very authoritarian state. Okay? Secularism as a response to religious uniformity, secularism as a solution to religious conflict, right? Again, it was a response, right? Sought to replace religious identity with political identity. So instead of saying, okay, listen, you're all Catholic Christians, or you're all Protestants and you're all Catholics, and we're going to keep warring with one another because of that, here, grab the passports. So everybody becomes Canadian, or everybody becomes US. That's what we share now. Not that we're Christian, but we share being citizens of the same country, of the nation state, of the secular nation state. Okay. So what happens to religion? It moves into the private sphere, while the public sphere becomes. Ish, what does it become? What does the public sphere become? Secular. Very good. The public sphere becomes secular. So you're a citizen first. That's your primary identity. Religion becomes private, okay? Other aspects of your identity are secondary. They're not primary. They can't shape your discourse in society. They need to be kept within your own realm. Be a goody two-shoes about it. Don't you dare bring it outside here. You know, if you do, well then you're a quack. Okay? It comes from Quaker, right? Who they said, they're an extremist Christian. They quake. They're quackers. You follow what I'm saying, right? They're insane. They're a type of Mormon. They're extreme. They want to enforce this stuff at a society level within their societies. So they're extremists. So stay away from them. Okay. This reflects the broader materialist philosophy of liberalism, which separates religious belief from public sphere. Immanuel Kant's idea of contractualism, the contract, the social contract we've been talking about this whole time, it is what governs it. It's self-contradictory, as we've already discussed. It's not neutral. It has inherent goods. Whatever it accepts to be good is what is to be applied. Other than that, it's not to be applied. Islamic society does not privatize religion in the same way. Religion in Islam is considered a truth, not just a set of private beliefs. It is integrated in both public and personal life. The Islamic concept of self acknowledges the centrality of religious space, unlike the materialistic self in liberalism, where religion is considered separable from the individual. In Islam, remember, ontology cannot be separated from epistemology. Epistemology cannot be separated from teleology, and anthropology. Anthropology cannot be separated from your ethics and your morality. That cannot be separated from law and politics. It's all one. Can't separate. Think of one, you think of the other. Okay. Replacing aristocracy with liberty. Philosophical liberalism replaced European aristocracy and hereditary privileges with the ideals of liberty and autonomy by creating the class of what? Bureaucracy. By creating the class of bureaucracy. So no matter what happens, no matter who comes into power and who leaves power, there's always a running state. This is called the deep state. This is called the deep state by many, as in it will continue to run, it will continue to practice no matter who comes in and out of power. This is the real power. This is the real power. Okay. Anyway, we already spoke about John Locke and his slave economy and how he got his notions from the Caribbean and Barbados, where he had major shares on slaves, and he said, "This is what not to do. This is the liberty of the white man." Right? Locke's participation in drafting South Carolina Constitution, which was then later used for the Constitution of the United States. So he was essential in producing the South Carolina Constitution, which was then taken and drafted for the U.S. Constitution. These are his theories, right? They helped export the ideas of autonomy and liberty, which were later scaled to the broader U.S. context, right? Liberalism's historical roots are in exploitation. While Locke is often revered for his contributions, right, his involvement in slave trade reveals a deep contradiction in liberal philosophy, right? The exploitation of enslaved. This is the same theory that was used to conquer who? Laws were made in the U.S. of finding kingdoms. So whatever you find, the law of finding. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? The law of finding? I think that's what it's called. Technically, but that law is any land that's owned by a Muslim or by an Indian, Aboriginal Indian, is for your taking. Because it's not anybody's, it's yours. If you find it, it's yours. Right? This is used up till today. Literally, last year, when in New York State, when the Aboriginals argued about one of the pipelines going through their land, saying this is our land, they used that law. The judge used that law from the inception of the US to say, no, we can do this. Because the law of finders. Okay. And France still uses it to control Africa, North Africa and Central Africa. Right? Self-ownership and autonomy. The highest expression of the sovereignty is autonomy. We've already discussed this. Didn't we already do this? Right. Impact on Native American dispossession. We've already kind of spoken about this dispossession of Native Americans. The doctrine of discovery. That's the technical word. Doctrine of discovery. A papal bull from the 1400s, he declared that any land owned by a Muslim, Saracen, that's what they called us, or a pagan Native American was up for grabs by European Christians. The doctrine provided a theological and legal foundation for colonization. Liberalism was at the heart of colonization. You can't separate it from it. It grew from, and it gained its strength from colonialism. So Ruth Bader, in 2008, they ruled by citing this doctrine against the Native Americans in New York. 2008. Okay, so ownership of land and resources, exploitation of nature, all of these things, environmental degradation, forests, they don't care about any of this. They don't care about what it does, just use. It's for your taking, that's it. The Islamic perspective is that we're stewards. We are mandated to protect the world and everything in it. Wastefulness, burning goods is sinful. Wastage of water is sinful. These things are part of your mandate as khulafa upon this world. Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. What did Allah say? That I will be placing on this world khalifa, a steward. Adam alayhi salam. Okay. Feudalism, we all know what feudalistic societies were about. You had the peasants, you had the aristocrats, you had the king, you had the clergymen. It was a flawed system, okay? But the system emphasized collective responsibilities. So it's like everybody's responsible. Okay? Liberalism's focus is on rights. So even though feudalism was absolutely wrong, but it focused on duties, responsibilities. Liberalism's focus is only on rights, right? So it's framing human rights in terms of entitlements. You are entitled by this, irrespective. Duty, no duty, there's no duty. You have rights, that's it. Great. Human rights is based off of a materialistic view. Remember when we were studying anthropology? When we were going through anthropology, we said human rights are in line with how you perceive humanity. What does it mean to be human? Right? If you have a different perspective, that means I don't really agree on these human rights. I can't. Because there's so much more to me being human. There's so many more rights that I would need. There's no, these are the ones we all agree on. No, we don't, though. I don't agree with you. You don't? You radical racist. I'm gonna get rid of you. You know? Okay. Definition of human being, right? Material, individual entitlements, etc., etc. There's no spiritual responsibilities. In the Islamic view, you are accountable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have souls. Just like how when we're having a class of how to find a spouse, what do we say? We have your unborn child has a right over you, just the way the Prophet ﷺ said. What is that right? To find a good spouse, to find a good wife. Just like for a wife, for a woman, it is important to find a good husband because your unborn child have a responsibility, a duty over you. These things are essential, right? So it's even way before that. But these rights are built off of duties. These rights are built off of duties. They're not separate from it. Rights versus obligations. Rights are highly individualistic, whereas in Islam, rights are often framed in terms of communal well-being and spiritual obligation. So you have rights that have to do with the community. Yesterday, we were studying in the Laqita. If you find a child in a Muslim land, automatically the child is lost. Automatically, the child is treated as a Muslim child. And if anybody finds him, they have to take care of him. They have to take him in. If anybody knows that there's a child out there that is lost and you don't go take care of them, everybody will be held accountable for the death of that child. And it's sin. Everyone. If a person, a Muslim in your community goes to sleep hungry, you are sinning. And that rule differs in accordance to how rich you are and how much power you have. So power in Islamic sense is not something evil. It depends on how close you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Power is not innately evil. In post-liberal thought, power is evil. It needs to be disseminated, it needs to be broken, it needs to be God. In Islam, it's not the case. Do you use it to implement what Allah wants? Right.
It's possible to wrap up just the rest just because we're
Yeah. So, khalas, we're done this. 3 pillars. Okay, we're done this. Critical assessment. Islamic alternatives. You have an Islamic governance. You have the Sharia. Okay, that has both spiritual and material. You are ethically grounded. Okay. What is this? Desire. Okay, خلاص, we're done now. Alhamdulillah. Subhanallah, bika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursalin.